Hey, thank you for joining. I'm sorry I'm late. We had a vote on the floor. I had to go there first. I'll start with a pressing national issue that's been front and center. Clearly, there's a surge of folks coming to the U.S.-Mexican border who wish to get in. There's a crisis, and it took a while for the Biden administration to recognize it, but it's clear. And you couldn't help but notice that as soon as it was clear that Joe Biden was going to be the president, the messaging and the policies changed, and there was a surge and is a surge of illegal immigration. As one example, Biden's Homeland Security Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, said would-be migrants, "We're not saying don't come, we're just saying don't come now." And, well, what message did that send? Last week at a White House press briefing, Biden advisor, former Ambassador Roberta Jacobson, told the media in Spanish, "La frontera no está cerrada," which means the border is not closed. And then in English, she said, "Oh, I misspoke." But I can tell you, the Spanish version was heard in Central America, not the English. And Ms. Jacobson admitted that Biden's campaign promise on immigration spurred the current surge at the border. So we've halted the Biden administration has halted the efforts to secure the border. They've halted deportations, and that has sent the message. So now people are sending their unaccompanied child on a train ride across Mexico, where she may be kidnapped and trafficked. She's sending that child, the mama's sending that child, on the hope she'll be waved through at the border. These policies, this messaging is leading to the surge that is unmistakable. I think the Biden administration was hesitant to call it a crisis because they didn't want to take responsibility. We need immigration, but it needs to be legal. We must secure our border and uphold our immigration laws, so those who come through proper and legal channels. It's compassionate for the people coming here, and it's also the way our country should be run. On a legislative front, today I'm introducing the End All Hazing Act with my colleague from Pennsylvania, Senator Bob Casey. This increases transparency and accountability in hazing nationwide. It was inspired by a tragic incident where a young man died in a fraternity hazing at LSU, and Senator Casey can point to the same sort of incident at Penn State. Prospective parents and their families should feel safe no matter what school they choose. This requires colleges, universities, post on their website if hazing took place on a particular campus or within a student organization. Only if it's established, only if it's proven. Providing this information will improve transparency, help students make the best choices for their future. It'll be a real comfort to parents. I'm also thrilled to announce the bipartisan legislation I wrote passed the Senate last week with unanimous support. The bill funds research of minority health disparities. It was named to honor the late Congressman John Lewis, and the bill increases investments in schools conducting critical research into minority health disparities. Xavier University is one example, doing great research. This legislation supports their efforts. Louisiana has a heck of a lot of healthcare disparities. Anything we can do to diminish disparities in Louisiana helps us all. Some Louisiana grants announcement. Last week I announced $2 million in funding from FEMA for Terrebonne Parish to restore levee system damage caused by Hurricane Barry. It allows the residents and businesses it got detopped, if you will, to put the earth back on there. That'll help keep the residents and businesses safe from flooding. It puts the levee system back to its pre-disaster design, function, and capacity. Lastly, a real shout out, Drew Brees, one word, legend. Announced his retirement, as we all know. I join all of the Who Dat Nation to thank him for what he's done for the team in New Orleans. And what about Louisiana Tech and NIT and LSU and March Madness? Go Bulldogs, go Tigers. Would love any questions you have.
Hey, good morning, Senator. It's Sabrina Wilson at Fox 8.
Hey, Sabrina.
First, Democrats are talking about a massive infrastructure package. Do you think there is a need for one? And if so, what should be in it? And secondly, I know you've been vocal recently, and also you tried during votes last year to keep prisoners from getting stimulus checks. However, you did vote for the two packages last year. Can you explain your decision making on that?
Let's work backwards. When the original bill was passed and stimulus checks were going out, no one anticipated that it was going to go to inmates. There was a court decision that said that you had to give it to inmates. So it was just kind of an unforced error. So it went out to inmates. On the second package, I put up an amendment to stop it. And for whatever reason, we were told that in the conference committee, it had to be included. So I'm thinking, this is crazy. So that's why on two separate occasions, just to make sure that this was true, I offered amendments to make sure it didn't happen in this bill. Again, inmates are already living entirely at taxpayer expense. They don't stimulate the economy. If they use the money, it might be to bribe a guard to bring in contraband. There's a lot of things that just are not right about this, aside from it costing $1.9 billion. And that's when it became very explicit. The other party, Democrats, actually favor this. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't just a court order. It's actually a planned policy. And so that's the reason why the first time and the second time I voted for, and the third time I made a big issue of. That was the second question. Sabrina, your first question?
Yes. So Democrats are already talking about a massive infrastructure package. Do you think there is a need for one? If so, what should be in it?
Well, there is a need for infrastructure. I'm not sure I'm not sure what they offer us is going to be that which we need. If you look at the COVID relief package, by far most of the money was for things unrelated to COVID, totally unrelated to COVID. Again, we just talked about stimulus checks going to inmates. That's just unrelated to COVID in my mind. But I could give you other examples. $130 billion going for schools. When the Congressional Budget Office says we already have so much money going to schools, this money won't be spent until next year or the year after. That's not related to COVID here and now. That's related to something different. So if the infrastructure package follows that pattern, yes, you build some bridges and some roads, but there's a heck of a lot in there that has nothing to do with roads and bridges. That'll be a concern. We got to see it before I vote for it. I sure hope we build some roads and some bridges. I sure hope we do some stuff for ports and waterways. I think the real question is, what else do they wish to have there? They've talked about $4 trillion. $4 trillion. There's going to be more in there than bridges and roads. Once more, we need to see what's in it.
Governor, this is Greg Hilburn. How are you?
Hey, Greg, I don't know if you're demoting me or promoting me, but I'm the senator, buddy.
So what do you think can be done while to tend to these children as this surge takes place? I know you believe that there should be an alteration in policies, but right now, is it your understanding that they're in conditions that are similar to the surges we've seen in the past under the Obama administration and then under the Trump administration? What's your understanding that these children are facing?
My understanding is that it might be worse because the crowds are even bigger. A whole lot of facilities, the facilities that were built by the Trump administration to handle the influx were temporary. Now, the surge went down. I'm assuming the temporary facilities went down. The fact that the surge has begun once more, I presume they have to stand up facilities once more, the temporary facilities, but that takes time. I think the reason that FEMA is being called in is not for tomorrow or not even for next week. They're calling in FEMA because they imagine the surge will continue to rise over the next several weeks. And I can promise you facilities are going to be overwhelmed. When that happens, the Border Patrol or the immigration officials tend to just start moving people in, waving them in which they just give their word they'll show up at an immigration judge appointment sometime in the future. Doesn't work. It hasn't worked in the past, and it ends up resulting in the tragedies I discussed at the beginning. So we just need to get a handle on it, do the basics, border security, send the message, the border is closed, it is not open, and do everything you can with Mexico and Guatemala to make sure that folks don't begin that trip up here.
Senator, there's a lot.
The female voice first, please. You were first.
Hi, Senator. It's Melinda. It's a lot.
Hey, Melinda.
Hey, I wanted to check in on the CDBG request for hurricane recovery. I know the governor has sent a letter to the Biden administration and said he's had conversations with them, but I feel like I haven't heard a lot of discussion from the congressional delegation these days. What's the status of that, and was there any effort to try and include that in the COVID relief package?
There's going to be a separate package for that. There was some disaster relief that was put in there. It was from a Democratic state, imagine that. But there will be a separate disaster package. And we're still working on that and wish to get it through. The good things, though, that now FEMA will have a 90-10 match. So that's very helpful. And that's on top of the 100% match we have for a 30-day period. And the governor picks those 30 days. So we've made some progress with our cost share, but that CDBG will be a separate piece.
And is there a specific amount that the delegation will be seeking? I know the governor asked for about $3 billion.
We take our leadership from what the governor and locals can justify, and that's our starting point for how much we can get. But we do, but obviously FEMA and the federal government requires the state and local government document as to why they truly have a need, and we just go and advocate for that amount picked by state and local.
Senator, this is Chris Rosado with WASB. How you doing?
Hey, Chris, how are you, man?
Doing good. Just two questions. In the infrastructure bill, was there any money included to go towards either continuing the construction of the border wall or possibly even maintain parts of it that have been erected already? Or is there any talks about taking down any sections of the wall? And then second question, in the COVID relief bill, is it true that there was money that was aimed towards educating kids being kept at the border? And if so, what does that say to families who are eager to get their kids back in school?
In the COVID relief package, you said the infrastructure, but I think you meant the COVID relief package in terms of money for the border. The Biden administration has shut down all construction of fencing on the southern border. So whatever money was already allocated, they are pulling back. And so there would not have been any money in COVID relief. I'm positive that there will not be any money in the, there won't be any money in the infrastructure package that they're putting forward. In terms of children in our nation, we have already put so much money out there for schools to reopen that CBO says it can't be spent entirely this year. Really, the decision to reopen is now based upon whether a school decides to. Private, parochial, charter schools have typically reopened, but the many public schools have not. In Louisiana, we've done better than elsewhere, but other places like Chicago, Los Angeles, and San Diego have still not reopened. So it's really a decision on the part of, in many cases, teachers' unions to agree to schools being reopened. As regards money to educate children on the border, all these packages include all that money you need for health care, vaccination, education, room and board, obviously, and for people to pay for their transportation costs as they move inland. Once you begin that surge, it initiates a heck of a lot of expenditures by the federal government to attempt to manage these children, as well as the adults, but particularly the children. So to your point, Chris, yes, that money is going to be out there.
Thank you.
Hey, Senator.
Oh, one more thing, Chris, I should mention that the infrastructure bill has not been introduced. So I just want to say there's no money in the COVID relief for the border wall, and I'm positive there will not be any money in their proposed infrastructure, but that has not yet been introduced.
Thank you, Senator.
Hey, it's Jeff, Senator at KTBS. How are
Hey, Jeff.
you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I have two tax-related questions. One is we keep hearing that the Biden administration wants to create the biggest tax increase we've seen in more than 30 years to pay for all the spending they're doing, and your thoughts on that. And number two, the stimulus money that's going to come to Louisiana, seems to be a stipulation on there that if the state accepts that money, they can't do anything with their own tax policy, like lower taxes or give credit. Congressman Mike Johnson has come out against that, saying it's the state's right to set their own tax policy. And I just wanted your thoughts on that as well.
Jeff, as always, great questions. First, there is a proposal that they would increase corporate tax rates from 21% to 25 or 28%. That's one of the things they have out there among other tax increases. It's always easy to say you're going to tax a corporation, but I was in a hearing just before this, and one thing we know is if a company has a choice to invest in a place where they pay 20% taxes versus another country where they pay 28% taxes, well, they'll make more money investing in the place with the lower tax rate. And so there is a difference in a company making an investment decision based upon that corporate tax rate. But on the other hand, what we're seeing here is a difference between the Republican and the Democratic Party. The Republican Party says, let's let people keep their own money and make decisions as to how to spend it, and that's the best way to grow the economy. The Democratic Party, at least in Washington, says, let's take the money from the people, filter it through the bureaucracy, give it to a few people we really like more than we like others, and at the end, we're going to put some money out there and see if that doesn't grow the economy. We've got two different visions, and one gave us an incredible economy before COVID, in which there was record low unemployment for you name the group, women and veterans and African Americans, Hispanics, the disabled, high school dropouts, you name it, record low unemployment. Now we have a recovering economy already, but we'll see if this trickle down from the federal government actually makes a difference. As regards your second point, you're right. The money coming to state and locals has the stipulation that if the state lowers taxes, that the money cannot be received. I'm investigating this now, speaking with the governor's office and with legislative leaders. My understanding, what I've been told, is, well, if you give a little bit of a tax abatement for live venues, because they've really been hurt during the pandemic, that's not, they don't mean targeted tax cuts, they mean an overall reform. Okay, what if you lower taxes here and raise taxes there and it's net neutral? Does that count? We don't know. The Treasury Department will be making these rules, but we are calling Treasury right now, trying to find out if they have an inclination one way or the other. This is something that I'm speaking to folks in Louisiana about. We're going to try and get an answer. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Jeff. One more question, please.
Hey, Senator. This is Fred Childers from WVLA. How you doing?
I'm good, Fred. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Keystone Pipeline. You had actually asked some questions of Deb Haaland. She's up for the Secretary of Interior. You had some concerns. While questioning her, you talked about how building the pipeline would not only save, I think you said something around 11,000 jobs, but you said it would decrease greenhouse gas emissions. Can you just kind of unpack that a little more?
Yeah, there was a State Department report released when President Obama was president, which said that building a pipeline lowers greenhouse gas emissions. They're going to get that petroleum to the refineries in Louisiana to be refined. If you do it by a pipeline, you're doing it by a pipeline. Otherwise, you're doing it by rail and by barge. And rail and barge releases more greenhouse gas emissions than does a pipeline. By the way, it also says, the same report said that you saved lives, because the more you handle something, inevitably there's going to be a worker killed because of big equipment moving back and forth. In a pipeline, it's a pipeline. And once it's getting pumped, it just goes through that pipeline. So we killed Biden's administration killed 11,000 jobs. According to a Obama-era report, it'll result in increased greenhouse gas emissions, and unfortunately, it'll also result in some workers dying who otherwise would not. Not good.
Thank you, Senator.
Hey, thanks, Fred. Hey, thank you all for being on. Again, I apologize for getting on late, but I had a vote, couldn't get around it. As always, y'all have great questions. I look forward to next time. Thank you.